I I don't introduce people because I've gotten it wrong so many times that I'll just let you introduce yourself so you can just say your name and what you're about.
Okay. Um, my name is Kara Looney, and it's, to describe like who I am. I think a lot of times people describe who they are based on their achievements and their accomplishments, and I most certainly have been that person, in an iteration of myself. Uh, but I think the most interesting thing to introduce myself with and through is the fact that I have changed so profoundly over the course of probably the past 10 years. And so at one point in time, I would have introduced myself to you as, a professional working on their career, trying to be an independent and successful um, woman in the modern world, and I used to work in law firms, and I was very structured, very regimented. I also teach group fitness and exercise and martial arts and these things on the side. I was always very ambitious, very driven, also very anxious and very untrusting of my circumstances and my environment. And I would constantly try to perfect myself and perfect my surroundings in order to bring myself into a state of feeling safe, secure, and stable. And then by divine guidance, I found yoga. I found the practice of yoga. And at first, I used the practice of yoga as a means through which to heal my body from various injuries that I caused as a result of overdoing it, right? Through the desire for perfection. And through that miraculous kind of alchemy of self-love that yoga ultimately brings, I recognized how out of balance things were in my life. When I would find balance through the practice, right? I'd come out of my practice and I would feel somehow more of an authentic version of myself. And then I started experiencing different styles of yoga, right? Once you start to kind of investigate the seed of yoga, then you're like, oh, and then there's that, and then there's that, and there's so many different directions you can go. Pranayama, sound healing, all of the derivatives and, supporting elements. And I found the practice of Kundalini yoga. And as much as I never really bought into a lot of the social organizing dogma of the practice, in many ways, right? It does have a bit of a reputation sometimes for having this culty energy. I tend to, by divine nature, have like a problem with people trying to take authority over me. So I don't really feel like I ever really have the tendency necessarily to fall victim to such a thing. And not saying that that's there. Everything has that element of potential to get into polarities, right? So, but what I found so interesting about Kundalini yoga was the energy work, right? So we use angles, we use breath, we use movement, we use rhythm, we use sound, and we use the elements of tension, friction, and pressure, right? Creating an environment of almost intentional stress, eustress as it's called, right? Good stress, as a means through which to transmute blocked energy. And it made a huge change in my life. And I had a profound Kundalini awakening experience as a result of priming my body for that type of work. And from that Kundalini awakening, a huge value shift occurred for me. And not everyone who practices Kundalini yoga has a Kundalini awakening. I've done a lot of research on Kundalini awakenings, which is something that, we could talk about to a certain degree. But based on that awakening that I had, which was both beautiful and terrifying all at the same time, because the whole foundation of my understanding of the world and myself was being flipped upside down. And it also ushered in this whole new understanding and paradigm of what it is to be alive, what it is to be conscious, what it is to be navigating the material world. So the things that used to be so important to me seemed like child's play after having this type of awakening. But there wasn't like this sense of grandiosity, right? It was actually an intense humility that came over me, that now I'm just seeking to gain more intimacy with. So that's a little about who I am now in present moment. With that experience, I left my previously cultivated career in the legal field, and now I teach Kundalini Yoga, Vinyasa Flow Yoga for a living, teaching online and in person. I also do spiritual and emotional coaching for people, right? Moving through fear, moving through spiritual awakenings, moving through transitions in life. I also, because of my own experience in kind of entrepreneurship, I also coach women. So far, it's been women, but I'm open to coaching men too on starting a small business. I have a couple clients that are starting small businesses in the realm of supporting spiritual growth. In addition to that, I also am a Vedic astrologer. I took a beautiful course in the ancient lineage of Parasara, and initiated into a beautiful community of fellow Jyotishis, is what the traditional term of Vedic astrology is. And that has opened me up to a whole different, deeper understanding of what that Kundalini awakening brought for me. Through Vedic astrology, I was able to see how the macrocosmic experience of the planetary movements imprints sort of a matrix or a map for our karmic experience. So the planetary alignments and the dignity and the placements and all of these things and the conditions at the time of your birth, the place of your birth, and the day of your birth, leads to a lot of understanding about oneself, both in professional life, in personal life, in spiritual life, in love life. It's really fascinating. So that's another thing that I love doing. And that's kind of where you find me here today, constantly endeavoring to expand and share what has moved me. Yeah.
Wow, wow. So you have a very sort of diverse and amazing set of skills and talents. That's incredible.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, it feels
Build them
sort
up.
of like astrology is so like hard, and there's so much math, it seems. And then I feel like Kundalini yoga and yoga is so flowy. It feels like you just sort of mesh these things together. That's awesome. I actually want to ask you about your Kundalini awakening, just what it was like. Was it sudden? And how did life change? And what are, you said you had a lot of perspective shifts, and yeah, it can be pretty powerful. I'm just wondering if you could share what happened. Were you in the middle of a Kundalini class?
No, ironically not. Which is where it probably would have been most supported, right? But it's amazing. First off, the amount of, Kundalini teachers I knew at the time that never really knew anything about a Kundalini awakening, never had a Kundalini awakening themselves. So as much as I was immersed in the observation and intimacy with that energy as a practice of yoga, a lot of people that I had encountered had never actually had an intimate experience with it. Maybe, passing moments, but nothing to the degree that I had felt it experienced. So I was trying to find, a reflection in my community of that. And it was also amazing to me, the amount of articles and books and things that were written about Kundalini awakenings of people who never actually had them. They were just purely drawing their information from research, but never actually intimate experience. So it was important to me to share my experience. I put out an article about it, and I talk about it in my classes, and I also coach people who are going through it. And what it was for me was, I had never really heard of a Kundalini awakening at the time I had it, which was actually fortuitous. Because if I did know a lot about the energy, there probably would have been some part of me that had a desire system wrapped around making it happen, which would have ultimately defeated the potentiality for that, right? When you wrap your mind around something and you have like an agenda, you kind of disrupt the flow of nature. And so thankfully I didn't really know too much about it at the time. I was quite naive. But I was experiencing through practicing Kundalini yoga, like this energy moving through me in various experiences. And then I just happened to be in a vinyasa flow class at a gym, where it's pretty sporty. And we're laying down on our backs in Savasana. And the teacher came around, as a teacher often does in a vinyasa flow class, and they'll put their hands on you, in Savasana on your shoulders, right, as a means to kind of relax you and things like that. And the second the teacher's hands touched me, all of a sudden, all this energy just shot up from the base of my spine and just moved up like liquid gold, through my spinal column. And it was infusing just ecstasy through my whole body. I mean, it was a full body orgasm that was just created from within. And I was in immense pleasure, and I had absolutely no awareness of my material reality. I was in a completely different dimensional experience. And it must have only been 5 minutes, because by the time I found my awareness back into the room that I was in, Savasana was over, people were packing up their stuff, and they had no awareness of the profound experience that had just moved through me. I'm looking around like, did anyone else feel that, see that? So I knew that it was just my own. And so found my way out of there in a completely altered state. And for the next probably week or two, I was in a very exalted state of experience. I was just plowing through spiritual books and poetry and Rumi and books on, ancient Indian things, and comparison between religious value systems, and all of these things that were just both easily digested and also intimately embedded within me as I pulled it in. And it was a vibration. I was in a vibrational experience of what I could only define as what I've read to be like Christ consciousness. I was in this really exalted space where death didn't matter and all of these things. And then ultimately, because of my surroundings and the collective consciousness, the vibration came down, and I came back down to a normal state of experience that allowed me to navigate. But I was changed as a result of that experience. There was no denying what happened to me. There was no excusing it away. It was probably the most true and real experience I'd ever had up to that point. And think about all the true and real experiences you have in the three-dimensional, right? Because of pain and all of the senses and emotions, this was above and beyond that. So it felt even more true. And then trying to take what now I have adopted into my consciousness and try and renegotiate my life. So going into the law firm felt impossible, because I would come into this exalted, lifted state on the weekends when I would practice, and then I would go back into this very heavy, conflict-rich environment, which was very, competitive and very cutthroat, and it would bring me a lot of stress, more so than it had in the past. Watching television, hearing what's on coming through sound, all of these different mediums, and really tapping in not only to the viscerality of it, but the consciousness from which it was coming from. So I was very sensitive to my environment, and it required me to shift my life to support my new sensitivities as they were growing in my body. Basically, the way I explain it to people is, it's like the wiring of a house. It's like trying to send a higher electric charge through antiquated wiring of a house, right? So that was happening. The wiring of my nervous system and my energy channels was still somewhat weak, but this powerful charge of energy was now moving through me that was actually challenging it to strengthen. And so through the challenging of the strengthening process, I was tender, vulnerable, like really easily affected. And so I had to nurture myself and like incubate myself for a good year or two. There was a lot of pain moving through my body. And the thing that saved me and prevented me from getting distressed and caught up in this what's wrong with me mindset was the books that people have written, people who've had those experiences. Gopi Krishna was a huge lifesaver for me. Even people like Pema Chodron, any book that's written on the movement of Kundalini energy, I can, recommend a few at the end of the video here. they gave me the confidence to know that what I was going through was indeed a crisis, but it was a divine crisis. It was a blessing. And the most important thing for me to survive that experience was to maintain the confidence that what I was experiencing was a blessing and was a growth opportunity and was a spiritually evolving unfolding that included pain, that included distress, suffering, hardship, challenge, uh, dissolution of my identity, yeah, so that's kind of what comes to mind to bring up at the moment.
Yes, it's so interesting. As you're talking, I'm seeing so many parallels, so many similarities to what I experienced. And before I had experienced that, I had read stories about Kundalini Awakening and I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't really believe it when I heard people talk about the energy moving through the spine. It's not that I didn't believe that there was energy, it's that I thought maybe it was metaphorical or something that was like super subtle and that you would only notice if you were silent. And then, and then I had a direct experience and I was like, oh, no, this is very real. And actually, at times, I don't know if this is the case for you, but actually almost paralyzing. And it just sort of felt like it took over my life and decided what had to go. That's sort of the energy that it felt like for me. And I'm sure it's different for everybody, but yeah, it was very, very real, very in my body. And it sounds like it was the same for you.
Yeah, and it's a consciousness, right? So it's not like you can control it. It's something that you have to recognize. This is more powerful than my mind. This is more powerful than my ego. The best thing I can do is endeavor to try and understand it and work with it. You know, I was in the normal culture of any person in their like early to mid 30s at the time, which is you meet your friends at bars and you do things like that. All the things that I had been doing that was just part of the normal culture I could no longer do. I would walk into a bar and I'd be like, oh, I could feel like desperation. I could feel sadness. I can feel grief. I felt the energy of everybody in that place. So the only way to survive that and like work with the energy was to put myself in an environment where people were endeavoring to improve themselves, endeavoring to raise their consciousness, to heal their traumas. That brought me a profound amount of peace and purpose. But to try and hang out in the old dimensions that only just cultivated continued karmic cycles was created a great deal of suffering for me. So you're right when you say that it takes over your life. It forces you to kind of clean up your act.
Yes, yeah. I was in a conversation with someone who's in the beginning stages, I guess. I don't even know what to call it, but it has started experience movement. And we talked about how it almost seems like it loves you enough, whatever this consciousness is, loves you enough to not care about your temporary feelings and your temporary resistances. Like it just knows what you're capable of, or something like that. It's just pure love that wants what's best for you and is sort of like a steamroller. It felt
Yeah.
like that for me, and it seems like it's feeling like that for her as well. So
Almost like a Kali energy, right? That destructive mother.
yes,
Mhm.
yeah, and it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. I think there are a lot of scary stories and I see a lot of warnings, but I feel like if you are in the right environment, and honestly, actually, if it's time, it's time, and it's
Mhm.
going to happen in your life. There's, like you said, there's nothing you can do to stop it or control it. So I don't feel, and for me, I don't feel like it's anything to be feared. I just feel like it's a blessing, like you said.
Yeah, and it's hard not to fear it because it's again completely destabilizing. And there are things that can cause the energy to maladapt. Meaning, if you're taking in a lot of toxins, if you're doing a lot of drugs, if you're drinking a lot, if you are eating a lot of toxic foods, the consciousness is trying to purify you. on multiple levels, on physical levels, on vibrational levels, on emotional levels. It's trying to purify you. So when you're going against that agenda, it's going to make it harder for the energy to move through you. And so the energy can maladapt because you're preventing it from flowing, right? You're preventing it from doing its job. You're counteracting. And the energy is going to express itself one way or another. It's, are you going to work with it? Or are you going to work against it? And when you work against it, this is where a lot of these negative experiences come from with people, you know. Also people who are trying to aggressively activate their Kundalini, right? With that type of driving motivation and using substances as a driving motivator to do that, again, that's very maladaptive. I believe a Kundalini awakening is a karmic unfolding. It's an intentional kind of like rite of passage for a soul's journey. So if you're trying to initiate that before the vehicle is ready for its expression, or you're compromising the vehicle through which the information is moving, you're going to come into some challenges. And that's what's kind of interesting about Gopi Krishna's books, because he had a Kundalini awakening that didn't rise through the central channel Shushmana. It rose in through his Pingala energy channel, which is the masculine fiery energy channel. And he would find himself in extremely extremely uncomfortable, traumatizing, experiences. And then through consulting, people in the know about that energy, they gave him recommendations on how to renegotiate the energy to move properly. So it's a powerful thing, and it's an intimate relationship. If you ignore it or contraindicate it, it can be pretty scary.
Yeah, I found that too. At the time, when I had, I guess, experiences, there were multiple, sort of all in a row. I was in a pretty toxic environment also, and it was the same thing. I could feel it. I could feel every little movement of energy, and I couldn't be in certain situations. Lights were bright, sounds were piercing. Like it was like everything had been turned up, and it was beautiful at times. Like really, I can remember being on the beach and just letting it take over, like literally saying, like, whatever you need to do, I'm here for it. I'm going to lay in this beach all day. And I did, and it was pure bliss, ecstasy. It was gorgeous. But then, it has to do its work, and I don't think that necessarily is always pleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a sense, I feel as if, humanity is coming to this point of culmination of consciousness where a lot of the old paradigms are being broken down. And because there's so much information coming in, the nervous system is being activated in the same way that I was talking about, this upgrading of the wiring of the house. We're being forced to process more information. And as such, the nervous system is being pushed to operate at a higher threshold. And with that comes a higher dimension of consciousness. So I think, even though some people are having like profound Kundalini awakenings, I think collectively we're all waking up. And so with that are coming what some would call ascension symptoms, right? And that can go into the realm of many different things. But the term ascension symptoms is like the pain that you feel in the body as a result of the purification process. And some people don't even consider that this might be a spiritual evolution that's taking place, because we're so trained by the modern medical environment to say, pain is bad, I need a pill. And so the person goes in and takes these pills to address whatever mysteriously isn't showing up on any tests or anything. And so they just name it one of those named things that basically means we don't know what's going on, but here's the name of the symptom. And so we're going to treat that with medication to suppress the symptom. But when you suppress the symptom, you're killing the messenger, especially when it comes to this type of stuff. And so there's that toxification. There's where that energy is going to start to maladapt. And I'm not saying that medicine is bad. There's a lot of benefits to medicine, but I think we've become so conscious of thinking that a pill can fix everything, that when the body is going through, and the consciousness and the soul and the spirit is going through a transitional rite of passage, and we're thinking there's something wrong with us, right? And that's the nature of the collective consciousness. So much shame, so much lack of self-understanding. That the biggest thing that a person can do is to really strengthen their personal sovereignty and trust that they're moving through something very beautiful and very profound. That's where spiritual community comes in and says, let's all get together and let's talk about this process. I host a 40-day meditation community. Every 40 days, we employ a new meditation technique. Some people are going through awakenings, some people are going through divorces, some people are great, you know, and everyone's just kind of, but their thing is, everyone's on a journey of evolution. And you cannot evolve in consciousness in a vacuum. It needs to be done in a collective, you know?
Oh,
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with that. Yeah, I think it's so needed. And I do feel that little communities are popping up all over the place, and people are knowing that they need other people who are also on this journey. So they're getting together and they're sort of taking the initiative to form little groups. I've done it myself, and I love that you're doing it. And actually just about everybody that I'm interviewing and talking with, they're all doing it in their own little groups that are so intimate and perfect and
Yeah.
perfect. So it's awesome. When you work with clients, or if you had a friend who is just starting to feel like they are having Kundalini awakening experiences, what would your advice to them be to
Learn.
let the energy flow?
Yeah, well, first learn about what you're experiencing, you know, and also be conscious of where you're deriving your information. Um, Maybe turn to people who have experience, direct experience, as opposed to people who are just talking about it but don't have direct experience, right? Find out, is the person that you're finding this information about one who has direct experience with the energy? Because a lot of times people like to just promote themselves as experts on topics that they've read a lot about. And in many cases, that's fine. But in a case of this, if nothing else, is more experiential. And only one who's experienced it can really understand and be of assistance to another, I think, who's going through it. So find, you know, trustworthy, reliable people to connect with, to gain some information, to gain some insight. And I think really practicing the art of trusting the unfolding as opposed to doubting it, hating it, denying it, because there's going to, guaranteed, there's going to be some discomfort. There's going to be probably some pain and some endings and some dismantlings of some degree, and it's necessary. It's a purification process on multiple levels. It's got to purify your experience, your life around you, and your inner environment, you know.
Yeah, on that, actually, with the purification and the whole process, I've always wondered this, and I actually am completely open because I have no idea, no opinion. Do you feel that the Kundalini energy has an agenda or a goal, not an agenda, a goal, and something that it wants to realize in the world? Or do you feel like it's just the nervous system being doing what the nervous system does when we do certain practices or when it's ready? What's your take on that?
I believe that the energy is reflective of divine universal consciousness, God energy, Christ consciousness, you know, Buddha nature, the Tao. It is the opportunity for us to merge more directly in union with truth, with the ultimate truth, right? It's an invitation. It's almost like a graduation process. You're moving from high school to college, or from undergrad to a master's program, right? We're constantly evolving. And this is taking the evolutionary process into a completely different paradigm than what humanity has been focused on for the past 1,000 years, right? Survival of the fittest of the physical body has been the main point of concern. And so, as such, people try to strengthen themselves, make themselves bigger, stronger, healthier, right? Survival of the fittest has been considered those who can survive the challenges of the physical environment and predators. We're moving now into a completely different arena. The only biggest predator that we have as human beings are ourselves, the destruction of our own race. But now we're moving from survival of the fittest physically into survival of the fittest energetically, emotionally, mentally. It's, can we reframe our understanding of why we're here and what our purpose is? The fact that we are not individual operating lone wolves, but we are part of actually a collective consciousness of individuals united at a stronger, more unified energy. And it's that unified energy that is working its way through us. So the purpose, in my opinion, or the agenda, or the ultimate goal of this Kundalini energy is to bring us more closely into our divine truth, into our divine ultimate potentiality. Enlightenment, maybe some would call it. Yeah. But having a Kundalini awakening is not the same as enlightenment. A lot of people will write that and say that, like, oh, Kundalini awakening makes you enlightened. Not true, right? It's probably a prerequisite to the enlightenment process, because it's an evolutionary shift in the vibrational frequency, which is necessary. But it is not synonymous with enlightenment. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I feel that the truth of what it wants to do resonates with me, just to bring us to those highest levels of consciousness so we can be that in the world, and not dump plastic in the water. and also just to bring light instead of darkness and disease. Like it feels like if there is a goal, it's about the oneness that we all are, and about our true nature of divinity. I feel that. So for people who are, well, I have two questions actually. For people who want a Kundalini experience, we'll start here. Is there something that they can do, or is it really just show up, do the practices, and there's nothing you can really do? It's going to happen or not?
Yeah, my take on that, I don't have the ultimate answer on that. I don't know the ultimate answer. My take on that is that it is something that will unfold when the consciousness and the vehicle is ready. I think it is in the DNA of all of us as human beings for that possibility. It may not express itself within a particular lifetime because of the lack of ripeness. Yeah, there's like a ripeness. And you don't know if you're ripe or not, right? It's just, but something else knows. And so I would suggest participating in balancing energy work, right? If there is something that's magnetizing you to learn more about Kundalini, I would caution someone to say, somebody who wants a Kundalini awakening, I would say maybe reframe that to consider that you're attracted to the energy, right? Maybe loosen your grip on it a little bit, and say, I'm attracted to learning more about that. I'm attracted to understanding more about that. And in that context, maybe start to prime the physical body, the mind, and the consciousness to be more receptive to the energy. Kundalini yoga, right? Tai Chi, Qigong, energy work, Reiki, cleaning up your diet, right? Cleaning up the what you're taking in through the five senses, right? If you're watching a lot of violence on television, if you're listening to a lot of like misogynistic and abusive music, you're toxifying your consciousness. You know what I mean? But if that is something you're drawn to, right? That's the shadow working itself out. So you would be putting the cart before the horse. Don't deny the truth of your reality. If you're not attracted to the light, and you're attracted to something that maybe is a little more dark, helping you work out the nature of the shadow of the consciousness, then do it. As Ram Dass would say, like, lean into stuff like that. I think oftentimes people think that, we're working with a tantric energy here. So shadow and light and darkness and light are both, different, but the same face of God in this context. So, playing with your desire systems, recognizing that maybe I have a really strong hold on this, so maybe I'm going to loosen my hold and maybe just avail myself to the energy. I fear I might be trailing off here into different dimensions of topic, but does that answer your question?
Yes, I feel like for me, I was sort of obsessed with having a Kundalini awakening. I really wanted it from the time I had heard about it when I was like, I think 17 or 18 years old. And I actually had, I guess, just a period of time in my life that was really, really dark. And I just forgot about it. I just dropped it. And that's when it happened. And I'm sure that it was a series of events and like stuff leading up in a perfect way. But it is interesting that you talk about the shadow work, because a lot of shifts happen for me right around the time where I finally said, okay, shadow work is not like this terrible thing. And I was so afraid to do it. And when I finally opened up to it, it was massively transformative. And leaning into those things, I don't know if you've ever heard of Dr. David Hawkins, but
Mm.
yeah, I love him.
Power
He
versus
ta-
force.
yeah, he's wonderful. He talks a lot about, like, if you're anxious, try to be more anxious. If you're angry, try to be more angry. And it seems scary, but when you can do that, when you are anxious and you try to be anxious, it just doesn't work. You can't hold on to it. It kind of fizzles out and it processes or digests or something. And I found that to be incredibly helpful. So I
Make
just
it
wanted
bigger.
to,
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I wanted to ask you as well, with the Kundalini energy, how has it sort of settled into your life now? Do you still feel the energy moving? Do you feel like it's sort of actively moving in your body, in your life? What does it look like now?
Yeah, good question. So after having that profound experience, I did gain reflection that that energy has been working its way through me throughout my whole life. And every maybe 7 to 10 years, every time I move through into a new stage of life, some sort of like profound energetic awakening would happen, but it was always muted, and then each time it would happen again, it would be a little bit more powerful and a little bit more powerful, and then finally bringing me to that point of Kundalini awakening at that point in my life. So I noticed that it runs in cycles of time or experience. Like I move through these cycles of life or these stages of life, and the energy has thus far, upon reflection, um, expressed itself in stages of intensity and growing in spiritual awareness. So if that pattern follows suit, there will be some next unfolding that happens, probably within the next 2 to 3 years for me. Um, then again, you try and put your thumb on something, and it'll do something different. But I do know that it ebbs and flows. Right, I can really get into an expanded state and really hold some divine connection. Nothing like that one time, right? And the days following. But having had that experience, I can tap back into that space without it feeling so overwhelmingly visceral. But what I do know is that that energy is constantly guiding me as a teacher. I have a channel open now between me and um, I don't know what, that speaks to me, whether it's guides or whatever. I can get into this space where I'm talking about something and it's not really me talking. It's some other consciousness talking that my consciousness is picking up and expressing out through my unique flavor. I guess you could call it channeling. I don't know. But it's it's creating a more spiritual, vibrational, and subtle understanding of dimensions that are beyond the physical, for me. And so far, that's helped me do my work. You know, feels very purposeful.
Yes, yes. I have to ask. I was actually going to ask a totally different question, but when you said that the words feel like they're coming through you, um, I have had even in the very beginning of like really wanting to seriously meditate and deepen my spiritual practices, I started moving, like having spontaneous kriyas,
Mhm.
and and they were beautiful, but for years they sort of stayed only when I was doing meditation. And what I've noticed now, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about this, is if I'm relaxed and I can um sort of slow down, I guess, and allow, the energy moves me in my day-to-day life. And I can actually kind of allow this. It can talk through me. It can even move my legs and I can walk. And I feel like there might be some people who are listening to this who think that I'm delusional. I've never found anyone who has been able to talk about this, but I'm dying to know if you've experienced anything like this, like not the kriyas when you're in meditation, but having it move you in your everyday life.
Yes, yes. You feel like you've entered a different dimension, right? There's a softness, almost like a gentle haziness, at least in my vision field. Um, and it feels like I'm certainly aware and in control, but it's almost like my higher self has stepped forward, some sort of neutrality, witnessing consciousness that's both me and not me. And there's a softness, there's a safety, there's a knowing, in it. And I experienced it yesterday. I was swimming, so I do a lot of swimming laps. I used to swim competitively growing up, and swimming is just the bilateral movement is so meditative. And I got in this space where I was like, I can see my body moving, I can see my arms moving, but I'm not making it happen. Something else is making it happen, and I'm in pure bliss. I'm just sitting here watching it all happen. And something else was moving my body. So, yes, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's so funny because when I was in that space yesterday, I was like, how would I even explain this to anybody? And it's so funny bringing it up. Yeah.
Yeah, I was blown away. I host monthly retreats, and part of the retreats, I always participate. I want to be on the same page. So I do all the meditations with everybody. I want to be in the same energy. So part of it is walking meditation, and it's about an hour to an hour and a half of walking in a meditative state. And I was like, I want to see if the Kriyas can move my legs. And to my utter shock, I was able to relax and my legs just started walking. And that's exactly what it felt like. It felt like I was a torso gliding on these robot legs that were just lightly moving me along. It was nuts. And it was so profound that I started crying. Like I couldn't stop crying. And then I was in the middle of the woods and was walking meditation. And, people use this path, but I was like, I don't even care right now. Like this is profound. Like I need to go with this.
Yeah.
And the energy stopped me. And I started doing these crazy yoga poses in the middle of the woods that I've never seen anybody do yoga like that. Like I don't even know where it came from. I would be in this position and it would start to hurt. So I was like, oh, I've got to get up. Like I got to get up. And I'd get up and it would allow me to sort of stay straight for a minute. And then it'd be like, nope, right back down.
Mhm.
It was so profound, and I've sort of learned to relax into that and sort of let it take over, and I haven't been able to find anyone who knows what I mean, so I'm really
And that will
happy to
stop over
hear.
time.
Yeah.
It's basically a purification process. The body is trying to rid energy blocks, move energy where it's stuck. Um, yes. And there was something I was going to say. Darn, I forget now. Before you had mentioned that, with regard to, oh, I know what I was going to say. So some of this feeling of an energy taking over, it requires a person to be in a state of allowing and surrender. And if you're just moving into this process, it can be extremely terrifying to feel that all of a sudden, like, I don't understand what's moving my legs in your example, but it is like for you, you've been experiencing it for a while. So you're like, ooh, this is when the good stuff starts, right? For some people it's like, oh my god, like what is happening? And that had happened to me a couple times in the beginning, where it was like, again, the ground being ripped out from under me and me being thrown off into a completely different experience, and then being asked to allow it, and you don't know, there's no messenger there said, oh, you at this point, you're going to do this. It's like trial and error. And if you go too far into the mistrusting and thinking there's something wrong with you, it can really delay the full expression of a spiritual awakening. You need to have faith, you need to trust, you need to really trust the loving nature of this expression. Otherwise, you're going to create a lot of unnecessary suffering for yourself.
Yes, yeah, that is when I started really experiencing the energy moving in me and also moving in my life, was when I sort of was at wit's end, I guess, and I was like, I just obviously I can't figure this out. So I'm handing this off to you. I didn't even know I still don't know who you is, but I don't want anything to do with this anymore. I don't want to make decisions. I'm done. And I've been sort of living that way ever since. And what I can say about surrender, and I would be willing to bet that you feel similarly, is that it's not scary once you're able to actually let go. And I think it also can happen in stages. I don't think you can necessarily say, I give up my whole life right away, without some smaller steps of like, I give up breakfast, and if it happens, it happens, like
Yeah.
small,
Small
small.
baby steps, testing
Yeah.
testing it. Yeah. I had to do a lot of that when I decided to leave my law career and try and become a you know professional yoga teacher, I guess you could say, or like do that for a living. I had to trust that opportunities would come, and they did, but sometimes right at the last moment. You know what I mean? There is a deprogramming that has to occur through experience, through testing the waters, where you can start to really rely on being supported by the universe. And it's still hard, right? As much as I may have moved successfully through one iteration of that, the universe will evidently and eventually throw me another, test, and say, how are you going to relate to this? And fear comes up all the time. Oh my God, how am I going to work this out? And oh my gosh, here's me trying to control things again. But when I can continue with my practice, connect with my community, get myself back into that space of higher understanding and lead from that place. That's why a regular spiritual practice is so important when you're working with this stuff, is you have to invite yourself into the space where you have the availability to trust it and lean into it and experiment with it. Right? If you're always in survival mode, it's not going to enable itself to do what it's trying to do. You have to get out of that mode.
Yeah, totally. Actually, I'm learning as I move on this journey that the survival mode is really, really detrimental. Like, obviously, it's helped us to survive. That's why we're here. But I feel like that is a big part of meditation, is getting to a space of, oh, all is well right now. You can't, how could you possibly move beyond that and transcend anything to be in a higher state if you can't get beyond the fear and the worry, anxiety of constant survival? So I'm starting to realize that actually it's everything. That feeling of safety is crucial if you
Mhm.
want to, move forward on the spiritual path. That comes first,
And
in
we
my
can't
opinion.
cultivate that from trying to organize things here. We have to
Yes.
be able to find the safety in the higher experience. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah, I agree 1,000%. I think it gets you into more of a survival mode and more into a frenzy of I'll be happy when, I'll be okay when, and then you're caught up in an illusion, first of all. And you also aren't sort of building that heaven within that we all have now. We don't need to seek outside ourselves, and tapping into that frequently, daily, it grows it like a garden. And then like Yogananda says, you have a portable paradise in your heart. You walk around, and that is truly, that has been my experience. Is stuff's going down and everybody else could be freaking out, but I can tap into that and be solid and be centered pretty much at this point, just because I've had so much practice and I'm very intentional about it. I really would say almost no matter what's going on, although that's not, I'm thinking of like all the possibilities, that's not necessarily true. But I've had crazy things happen that were really, really challenging. And I'm like, how in the world did I get through that? And I really believe it's because of the daily spiritual practice. I really
Right.
think it's crucial.
In a Kundalini awakening, working with Kundalini energy in the way that we have, um, gives us a glimpse beyond death, right? So we aren't as beholden after that experience, at least for me. I'm not as beholden to the survival of my body as I was before the awakening. The awakening opened me up into an understanding of the survival of an element, a powerful element of my being beyond my body and beyond my thinking mind. So I know that there is a part of me that will survive these challenges and will die someday on the physical frame, but then on some level there is a part that still carries on. And through spiritual practice, you're developing an intimacy with the part of you that carries on. And so then you're by nature becoming less fearful, because you know that there is a part of yourself and you're developing an intimacy with it that is indestructible, and
Oh,
it's a very confidence building and peaceful place to reside in, right? That portable paradise.
yes, yes. Oh my goodness. I when you're saying like eternal, like we're eternal, that's the sense. And I had shortly after my first the big experience, I saw my body on the ground. I felt it during meditation. I felt like my body was on the ground, and it struck me, the body dies, but I don't die. And I kept repeating it. It must have been, I swear, it felt like an hour. The body dies, but I don't die. It was the biggest breakthrough moment. I don't know why up until that point, intellectually, I got it. And I thought that I understood what that really meant. But I really got that that body is just a body on the floor. Like it really has nothing to do with me. That is not me. And it just struck me. And from that point on, I really felt, I wouldn't say fearless because I definitely have fear, but it's, even when I'm afraid, it's different. It's not world ending, stone in my throat, I can't do this kind of fear.
Right. And that's what
Yeah.
makes me to think, like Einstein said, you can't solve a problem at the level of consciousness that it was created at. And so as we evolve in consciousness, we relate differently to the previous problems that existed before a state of consciousness evolved into being what it is in, right? So when you have an experience like that, all of a sudden, the framework through which you worked with your problems and your trials and errors and your fears has been shifted, changed, evolved, healed, transformed. And now all of a sudden you're working with a whole different deck of cards to navigate your life. And it makes a huge, huge difference.
It changes everything. David Hawkins, again, I just adore him.
Oh, yeah,
He talks about the homeless man, seeing the homeless man through the different states of consciousness, and how, at shame we might feel one way. We might feel that he is shameful, this homeless man, it is shameful that this person is being seen, that we have to look at him. And then in the level of love, at the state of consciousness of love, we feel that he's totally lovable and how beautiful he is, and our heart goes out to him. So it is all the difference. I feel like this work is the most important thing that a human being could do.
Hands
I
down.
really do. Yeah.
People talk so much about politics and what side of politics are you on? Politics is, as Hawkins would, was it Hawkins? There's another book called, oh, what's his name? Hang on a second. Robert DeWitt. Robert DeWitt wrote a book called The Master Game. And he writes it in the perspective of he who, right? So I like to make it in he or she who. But he talks about the stages of consciousness, in that there are various games that we are playing, and the ultimate game is the game toward achieving understanding of our divine connection to the universe, right? But like the political game, he would call that, I think he would call that the Moloch game in his book. And it's basically, you're just basically fighting the same fight on the opposite ends of the spectrum. And for me, all the divisiveness that's going on in politics is really just representative of the limited state of consciousness of humanity, right? It's not a matter of politics, blue and red, Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal. It's a matter of evolving consciousness beyond that polarizing duality, moving out of duality into an understanding of unity. And so in that context, all of the things that we think we can solve through voting in the right person or the wrong person, all the things that'll be destroyed. I really just think it is like treating the symptom like we would with a pill, as opposed to getting to the heart of the issue, which is really an evolution of a necessity for an evolution of consciousness of humanity.
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness. 1000%. And I think that's why a lot of spiritual teachers feel so like driven to bring the spiritual practices to the world. I feel like it would make all the difference if people could just get to that center, just tap into that paradise within that really is there for everybody. It feels almost like too distracted to get into that space, which is why meditation is so useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To speak to Hawkins again, he talks about each emotional experience having a vibrational frequency, the lowest being like shame and hatred and resentment and all of that. But when you understand that it's just a matter of not mental renegotiation to move beyond those states, it's literally energy work, right? If you can change your vibrational frequency from the frequency of shame or resentment or hatred or violence to the vibrational frequency of gratitude and love and appreciation and celebration, again, it can change the experience of a collective. But people think it's all in the mind, and it's really in the vibrational energy field. It's energy shifting
Yes.
the frequency.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. I started this journey really very young and very into the chakras. And they were hugely transformative for me. Just, I don't even know exactly what meditation techniques I did when I was younger, but I still work with the chakras because that energy work works. It works so well. I don't know where I would be without it. And on the retreats, I watched these women go through this transformation, and all of it really, I can't even think of an exception, is releasing. It isn't something that gets added. It's all this releasing of the old and transcending into something new. But they can't do that until they are willing to be open enough to let go of all the old stuff, which feels like it comes with a price. That's what I've noticed. Like you have to give up a part of yourself.
Sometimes it does, right?
Yeah.
You have to let go of the relationship. You have to let go of the job in order to be more true to yourself. Sometimes.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
sometimes it's really scary.
It totally can be scary, but it is interesting. And I'm sure you have the same experience. The Kundalini Awakening, and I mean, for years, ripped my life apart. Really, everything just was, it ended. A lot of endings and transformation and body stuff going on. But looking back, oh my goodness, I'm incredibly thankful, because I don't know, I couldn't even imagine having that life. I couldn't even imagine still living in that space. But the potential was there. I could have, but I did, like you said, I can't think of who said the quote that enlightenment, spiritual awakening, you can't force it, but or it's an accident. It's an accident, but the spiritual practices make you accident prone. And
Mm.
that is exactly what I feel like I was doing. I was doing a lot of yoga. I was eating really well. I was meditating every day, even though I was in this really tumultuous situation that I didn't even know I was in
Right.
until I was able to look back at it. And it's a miracle. It really feels like a miracle and a blessing, and divine grace that we're able to tap in, that we have even the internet. People like you being able to reach out to many people and share your wisdom, share what you know. We weren't able to do this before, which is a big part of why I feel that we're seeing a lot of people waking up.
Yeah, the environment is prime. Because of this access to more information, so much is becoming available, and the nervous system is being stimulated in a way that it's pushing it to a threshold of tension, friction, and pressure, right? And so when we reach a threshold, we can do one of two things. We can transcend, or we can, suffer as a result. And so when you prime yourself, to become, as you say, accident prone, um, you enable the potential for success to transcend and move into a higher dimension of reality and of consciousness and of potential with this energy that is so natural. It's nothing but natural. It's nothing to be afraid of. Same with death. Death is the most natural thing, but again, it's like so terrifying. But yet all of the things that are so unnatural, we're so accustomed to and comfortable with. It's really odd.
It is. And it feels like a lot of it is almost like escapism, trying to escape the natural processes of aging and death, and all the different ways that our body shows up. Like our body, it's beautiful, but it's also, thinking of aging, it feels like something to avoid. So we do the unnatural things, and death is the same way.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what advice you have for people who are just starting to be attracted to the spiritual path and just starting to realize that there's more to life than the physical life. You could call it waking up. They're starting to wake up.
Mm.
What would you tell them?
Follow your heart. Follow your heart in that context, not your head, right? I think the consciousness of the heart is where the majority of this wisdom sits, right? If we're overthinking, overprocessing, overcomplicating, overdoing, we are kind of acting in contrast to the emotion, but it's from the space of the heart and the intimate understanding and accepting of one's own experiences, that and not trying to run away from it, that I think brings us into a space of allowing, to what this is, and giving us permission, giving ourselves permission. If it's something that people want to cultivate, right? If they want to cultivate it and see if they can strengthen it and lean deeper into it, I would recommend, trying out different modalities that sit with you. Each person has their own personal constitution, their own, way of being and things that interest them. Some people are really drawn to like reading books about it. Like that's me. I'm also very physical. So I love using my body as a tool of expression. So yoga, energy work. Some people are really drawn to breath work. Some people are drawn to music, right? Music can be a powerful, and sound healing can be a powerful cultivator for this type of thing. So my suggestion would be to dabble and see what really resonates. Try Kundalini work, try different styles of yoga, try different breath work techniques, and when you do that, you also open yourself up into, weird stuff and toxic people and all of that stuff. So always remember, especially in the beginning, there's a there's a there's a there's a need to incubate that energy. So take care of yourself, self-care, like setting boundaries, all of that stuff, listening to your body, listening to your how things feel.
Yes. Yeah. I think the listening piece is so important. And for me, something profound that I learned, I don't know how long ago, a few years ago now, was to speak to the back of my heart. And it sounds so fuzzy, new agey, but I really was struggling with something, and somebody suggested, just see if you can tap into the space behind your heart and ask it what to do. And I was like, all right. And it had the most beautiful advice. And I just broke down crying when I heard this, and I knew what to do. And
Hmm.
it was the right thing. So I think it's listening to your heart, and maybe even actually physically tapping into the heart and listening, like breathing into that space
Yeah,
and
yeah,
listening.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a consciousness there, right? We have all these brain cells. These same cells that are in the brain also exist in the heart, and they also exist in the gut. So there is a consciousness, a thinking, uh, maybe a processing or cognizing potentiality that lives not only in the space of the brain, but also in the heart and the gut and all throughout the body, quite honestly. Especially as you advance your consciousness through movement and all different things, you're understanding that consciousness is not just relegated here. Consciousness is running throughout the whole body, and so is the mind. Um, yeah.
Yes. Yes. Could you tell us a little bit? You mentioned the 40-day meditation group. Could you tell us about regular events or membership stuff you have going on?
Oh yeah, sure. Thanks for asking. So one of the things I have on my website is basically a virtual yoga studio. I teach 4 live stream classes a week, 2 Vinyasa Flow and 2 Kundalini. And people have various ways in which they can participate in membership and also come in for drop-ins. There's also a video library that comes with the membership. So if you can't make live class, there's always a whole video library of the various classes. And every class we explore a topic, especially in Kundalini Yoga. Flow, we're just moving through the body, we're working. I'm always bringing in an element or a consideration. There's always beautiful music that I bring in. With Kundalini, we have Dharma talks. We're talking about, these types of things, and then doing the energy work to support the topic of consideration, mantras as well. I also have my 40-day meditation journeys, which run every 40 days, and we take a 2-week break in between. And we either work with a mantra, a Vedic mantra, or this time around, we just started just this past Wednesday, yesterday, was the kickoff class for our 40-day meditation journey working with Tonglen, which is a Buddhist meditation technique where you breathe in that which you are resisting and you exhale out healing. So in the context, if you were talking about the various stages of like consciousness as it relates to that example of the homeless person, you breathe in maybe the lower consciousness resistance that you have to like resistance or repulsion, right? And then as you bring in more acceptance, the consciousness around that topic actually evolves and changes. So you bring in more compassion as a result of more allowing more space for it, right? And so it's a physical practice of bringing in more allowing about whatever it is in our lives that we are resisting or having a challenge with. And we're working with a book called Waking the Tiger, which is a book about healing trauma by way of energy work. And so we basically meet twice a week virtually on Wednesdays and Sundays, and then people meditate independently and catch up on the book on the space in between our meetings. And it's nice to do this in a 40-day context, right? Because first, creating a long-term meditation process, like for the rest of your life, right? If you're doing it in a vacuum and you're doing it by yourself, you may be working with a mantra or a technique. And ultimately, as Ram Dass says, you end up sleeping through all alarm clocks, right? Whatever it is that served to wake you up at some point now becomes something that's benign and banal and rote, right? So if we take a new technique every 40 days, we're learning, we're creating more discernment, more understanding of subtlety with different techniques of meditation, but we're also keeping some life force in it and making it new and changing and adapting and evolving, just like life in and of itself. So that brings a lot of consistency. I will say that this is my 18th journey that we're starting here. So it's been over 2 years, I think. And still so many people from day one coming back and doing these journeys because they're finding a benefit in connecting in community, changing it up a little bit, and also moving in 40-day increments is really powerful because it's long enough to witness the change, but short enough in which you don't fall into sort of a sleepy trap with it, you know?
Yes, yes, I love that. I love it's sadhana, right?
Sadhana. Yeah, it's a
40-day
sadhana.
sadhana. Yeah, I love it. It is a perfect amount of time. You're getting some depth, and then you're changing things up, because I do think that's important. And I have a spiritual community, and I'm always sort of trying to keep things fresh. And I feel that it's important to be open to the next higher thing. Like, I really want to be open to that. I don't ever want to feel like I found the thing, because there is no the thing. It's always evolving.
Mm.
So yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. And
Yeah.
what is your website? Just your name?
Yeah, caralooney.com. And not only, can a person join the yoga club community as membership, you can drop in, you can, register for the next 40-day journey. Registration's still open if anyone wants to do it. I usually leave it open for a little bit after we've started. Some people like to jump in late. And you can also, reserve some coaching and book an astrology reading on my website. So yeah, there's a lot that can be done
Nice.
there.
Nice. And I'll have the link below, and the link to your YouTube channel also.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, this was lovely. I
Oh,
loved
total
it.
pleasure. I just, it really feeds my heart to be able to talk about this beautiful consciousness with somebody who's also experienced it. Because I think, although it's not as few and far between as we may think, I think a lot of people dismiss what's happening as something being wrong with them. And then they go seek all this medical treatment, or something. So I really want to create the space, and I'm happy that you're of that thinking too, to really help people reframe what it is to go through a spiritual awakening and what's necessary as far as spiritual sovereignty, confidence, trust, in order to move through that more gracefully and not deny its presence, because it can be shut down and shut off. If you don't cooperate with it, if you don't co-create with it, it will say you're not ready. Okay, I gotcha. I'm just going to go over here now, and just sit around for a couple more lifetimes until you're ready again.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I do feel like it's important. It's important work. Yeah,
Mm, totally,
absolutely.
totally.
Yes. Thank you so much.